How's it going, y'all? This is a new format that I'm trying on this channel. And to be honest, this is my second one of these. The first one, I didn't like where I took it. I took it to talking about things that I'm not really that passionate about. But this will be, ultimately I want to think about this as advice to myself. Whether that's advice to myself in the next couple years, things that I should be paying attention to, or just like things that I need to say out loud so that the me right now is reminded of those things. So advice or reminders to myself. I thought about making it brutal advice to real estate agents or something like that, because that's a title that kind of works, right, on the likes of YouTube and things. And maybe I still will call it that, but it's ultimately brutal advice to me. Things I need to hear right now. Things that I need to hear right now, or a lesson I just learned that I might need to know, or I might need to remember later on. And again, I think by speaking these things out loud, it will allow me to cement them into my brain a little bit more by saying, hey, this is a thing that I believe, or this is a lesson that I learned. I think that's me telling my brain, building that story in my own mind, beyond just going like, in my brain being like, there's a lesson. I genuinely think that like taking a thought and speaking it out loud and ultimately releasing it on a channel like this, there's something about that allows you to like have that idea better, hold that belief a bit more true. And one thing that I know for sure, it will continue to be a theme on this channel, but in this format especially, is that I don't care what brokerage you're at. I don't care what brokerage you're joining. I'm at Real Broker. I don't care, right? I don't care what you're on. I've talked about Real Broker a lot on this channel, and I ultimately, you can look back from this video to the previous video, a little bit of time passed, and I ultimately was just like, I don't really care. I don't really enjoy just talking about Real Broker very much. Again, I think they're great, and I'm at Real Broker, and I think they are the right brokerage for me right now. But I don't find it that interesting to be talking about all the time, and I don't find it that helpful to me to be talking about it. There were certain things that were actually helpful early on because it helped me understand certain things about how the platform or how the brokerage worked. So getting like an idea or working through how to structure like how you're talking about something. Sometimes videos are really, really helpful for that. So in understanding like how the splits work, just with agents on my team, making those videos was super helpful. But again, I do not care what brokerage you're at, what brokerage you're trying to join. This is not a broker, this is a broker-agnostic channel, or at least video concept at this point. And this sounds rude, and I'm not trying to make it sound rude, but I also, statistically at least, I almost certainly do not want you to join my team. And that has been a lesson that I've learned in having this channel a little bit, and sort of allowing some eyeballs to notice my team and my brand and things like that. And I've just realized that like, it's not what I want. I don't just want more bodies on my team. I don't want to be a recruiter. Real Broker doesn't allow recruiting. They allow attracting, but it's like, that's just not how I want my days to be. I want my days to be doing stuff that I really, really enjoy, which is primarily branding and marketing and creating content, right? And being creative. And I love that I've managed to find a way to be creative in real estate and make it actually feel like I'm being creative, and not just like, oh, I make content for something that I don't care about at all. I actually genuinely enjoy the things that I make, and I think we make cool things. And I want to be able to continue to make more of those things. And one way that I'm doing that is by focusing my team down to be only killers. I genuinely only want killers on my team. And so kind of like a strange transitional process sometimes, even just in my own mind, of like, well, I spent quite a bit of time trying to grow my team, and sometimes those things can feel like a waste of time, and maybe it technically was, but it's also a really, really hard learned lesson. And I think there's no better lesson than one that you learn the hard way, right? No lesson sticks better than a lesson that you learned the hard way. And spending a year or year and a half on this channel in particular, and the previous videos that we were doing, what it made me realize is there's kind of the old trope of success just means an opportunity to do more of what you're doing. And what I was doing was making videos and helping kind of like trying to be helpful to people who are new to real estate or who were struggling in real estate. And while I still want to be helpful in that way, the format took a ton of energy, and it made me sort of take my eye off the ball of one main thing, which is real estate and running my real estate teams and bringing in clients for those real estate teams. And again, while I really enjoyed a lot of the stuff that we made on this channel before this, it was when it worked, when we were successful in what we made, it meant that I got to / had to, again, which sounds mean, but I had to Zoom with people who were brand new agents who were asking me why a brokerage would be a good fit for them or why the team would, and I was like kind of put in a position where I was like selling the idea to people, and I don't really like to do that. When I talk to people, I actually just talked to this dude named Rudy, who is awesome. Shout out to Rudy. He was the kind of guy who I was like, I have no problem telling you that Real Broker would be a good fit for you, right? Because everything he told me, I was like, okay, you're really similar to me in how you operate. And so now what you can do is be lone wolf, right? You can do your thing within the parameters of this brokerage. You can do your own thing. They will support you doing that, and they will let you do your thing. But there are so many people who are like, who even with all this content that I make saying, here are ways to get clients, you still would Zoom with people. And if you're watching this and you Zoomed with me, maybe this wasn't you, right? And maybe it was. But there are people who, again, they must have seen the content because they reached out to me. So they must have seen the stuff that I was talking about. Maybe they only saw the stuff about the brokerage, but they must have seen that content. And if they did, maybe it didn't sink in because it was clear to me that they did not have a plan for how they wanted to get clients, or how they intended to get clients was very different than how I teach or how I personally do. So again, it has occurred to me that at this point in my life, in my career, that like those videos are not what I'm trying to do, right? Like bringing people over to my brokerage or my team is not my main goal at all. My main goal is to make a few agents or the agents on my team as busy as they care to be, but only if they are killers, and only if they are devoted to it, because I know that I can find devoted people if I have business for them, and if there are friends in my life who, if I had enough business, I could guarantee them a certain amount of money every year. I think there's no question that they would come over. Because it would be a cool opportunity for them. And a lot of people hate their fucking jobs, and if a cooler opportunity existed to work around people who they enjoy working around with flexibility and all that stuff, a lot of people would be like, sick, let's do it. Especially if I could take the risk out for them. Because to me, that's one of the most difficult things about jumping into real estate is the risk, right? There's undeniable inherent risk in starting a real estate company and becoming a solo real estate agent. There's no guarantee you make any money, right? Literally no guarantee at all ever. And there never will be a guarantee that you'll make money unless you join a team who has some sort of guarantee structure baked in. But then typically, my understanding is there's a certain amount of inputs that they're going to require of you. And if you do steps 1 through 40 perfectly, always, they will guarantee you a certain amount of income. And that's cool. At least that exists. But to me, that's not how I wanted to join real estate. I wanted to do real estate so that I could grow something my way and make a really cool thing out of it, which has been the case. It's been such a wild ride for the last 5 or so years, and it's very cool. Part of the point of these videos and this format that I'm doing is to work on. It's so funny as I start to think about this. I think it starts to get worse. But part of the point of this video is to work on speech and to get not necessarily better on camera. I'm pretty damn comfortable on camera, but to be able to speak more fluidly, more, maybe not eloquently. That's maybe not the right word. I'm not trying to be anybody who I'm not, but to be able to speak in front of people, to be able to speak in a format like this or on a podcast or where as a guest where I'm saying I'm using fewer filler words and less ums and less ahs and things like that, right? It's so funny. The second I start thinking about it, my brain is like hyper analyzing, like, are you about to use one of those filler words? But again, what I find interesting is once I start thinking about, am I pausing? Am I speaking too casually or sloppily? The second I start to think about it, my speech slows down quite a bit and my pauses increase a lot. And I wonder, are pauses like these more annoying than using a filler word like or So I don't know, but I still think if I can cut out the filler words and naturally figure out a way to not use the filler words, the gaps will slow down if I just am training myself not to say those things. And this, I'm gonna have my phone out. This is not going to be a super highly produced podcast. It's going to be real, and I'm going to work through things that I need to work through, and I hope that there's some level of being helpful or entertaining or whatever. And I think eventually I'll just get better. So I'm going to put this one out. What's interesting is I recorded one a week ago. As of now, I'm recording these Sunday mornings, and I recorded this a week ago, and I just didn't like what I was talking about. I was like, I don't find it that interesting. I started talking about AI and shit. And I'm just like, and I think it's because I was kind of dabbling in some AI things, but I was just like, this is not one of those things. This is not a reminder to myself. This is me just like talking about things that are going on in the world, which is not what this is trying to be. So just don't think of this advice. Think of this as, you can think about it however you want, but to me, how I'm trying to do this is, again, not advice that I'm saying, hey, whoever you are who's watching, you should do this. It's more, hey, me, these are the things that we're working on, and we're flushing those things. Fleshing? I think it's fleshing. We're fleshing those things out, and we're trying to arrive at a plan. We're trying to get an idea from an idea to a plan, or we're trying to smooth out the bumps. Once we have the plan, we're trying to smooth out the bumps to make the plan actually work. And then once the things that are working, how do we make them work better? And a lot of this for me is that I wish that I could listen to some of the people, some of the creators, some of the business owners who I admire. I wish I could listen to them work through the ideas. From a YouTube standpoint, which if you don't know, YouTube and social media and basically content, video-based content primarily, is how all of my teams get clients, right? So is how we basically get 99% of every client is from YouTube or social media, video style content. Obviously some photos and things like that, but content primarily. And so a lot of the people who I admire in the business space, they are content creators as well. And I'm constantly looking to them for inspiration, but little nuggets, right? So many of the things that people teach, the likes of, let's say, like Gary Vee, Alex Hormozi, those are like two of like the biggest names I can think of in that space. They're both, I think, really, really exceptional at what they do. And it's funny, now I'm thinking about how long of a pause that was. It's so weird how the brain works when you're trying to like get an idea out, but also trying to make it be watchable. So I'm going to do my best to not think about how to make it watchable and just make it watchable by virtue of it being honest and all that. So Gary Vee, Alex Hormozi, they make a ton of content. They make very meta things where they're talking about how to make content, right? They're making content about how and why to make content. It's very interesting. It's stuff that I pay attention to all the time. I'm constantly trying to improve that part of my business. And I genuinely know that leveraging content and social media and the attention that's on those things is the number one best use of my time. And so I guess what I wish I could see with them, and again, they put a lot of stuff out, so maybe I've missed some of those things, but the things that I wish I could be sort of a fly on the wall for, the parts where they go from having an idea to having a plan or having an idea to executing it, in some of those things in between, where they work through like, okay, me as Gary Vee, obviously I'm not Gary Vee, but they're like, here's an idea. Okay, I'm trying to think of like one of the things that he does. He did like fireside chats, I think, is one of the formats, is what one of those is called. And at some point he must have said, let's do fireside chats, or somebody on his team said, what do you think about a fireside chat? And I would love to have just sat in on that conversation or that meeting or whatever, where they went from an idea to, okay, how do we get it to what is now fireside chats? Or I think Ask Gary Vee or Morning Tea or something like that. It's funny. I'm like, Tea with Gary Vee maybe. It's funny. I watch a good bit, so I'm not trying to like pretend like I only casually watch Gary Vee. I'm just like, damn it, what are these things called? Yeah, I promise I'm not pretending like I'm oh yeah, he has those things. I genuinely watch quite a bit of his stuff, and so it's pretty interesting that I can't think of that. I think Tea with Gary Vee is the main thing. But so yeah, how do they go from like, what do you think about this? Tea with Gary Vee. I think it was like Zoom calls during COVID, I think is how they started it. And they're like, and there'll be like a level of production behind it where there's people who are, hey, we have this person who has this question, and then they go on and they ask Gary a question, and then they move on to another question. But what I mean, back to my main idea, is I wish that I could have witnessed them having an idea and making decisions behind that idea. That makes sense? So that's ultimately what this podcast or whatever this format is. That's ultimately what this will be, hopefully. That's the intention of it now. And maybe I'll find a higher use case for this style of video. But yeah, so one of the things that I'm working on personally right now is I've sort of caught up with some of the main content for the main channel to the Twin Cities on YouTube. I'm working through having some of the team that helps me on the editing side of things, working through them creating short form content for the likes of TikTok and Instagram. And maybe I should put it on, maybe I'll put some of that short form on YouTube as well. But I'm trying to like turn the content dial up, right? From whatever I'm at right now, let's say it's 5. I'm at a 5, which some people around me would say, no, my content is much stronger than that. But I can't help but go, nah, it could be much more of a machine. And there was a while where I think it was probably at its peak content machine. But then what happened is we realized that certain parts of the machine, basically certain teams, weren't actually producing enough, right? Certain markets that we decided to go into, they just like didn't produce enough, and it cost too much to get out there, and so those experiments just like didn't quite work out correctly. And some of it is probably that we couldn't make a holistic enough brand because we spread ourselves thin, right? So in deciding to go, okay, cool, I'm doing this thing called To the Twin Cities. It's working. And these videos work, and this style of videos work. Then I'm like, let me try this in a different market. And so I tried Denver. And Denver started to work. It's also where I met my now fiance, the first time I was out there ever. Maybe I can tell that story later, but yeah, first time I was ever out there, met my fiance, my now fiance, and there was not. But yeah, the rest is history, right? And so we did Denver. It worked, and it's, to me, it was like, okay, this is very promising, and it's like exciting, right? And so I thought, okay, how do I expand beyond this? Which I'm glad I did. I think that was a valuable lesson, and you don't know unless you take a swing, right? And so I take swings. It's what I do. I'm not afraid to take a swing and absolutely fucking whiff in public, right? Actually, in baseball, I actually probably would be. I'd be mortified. But yeah, in business, in content, I don't give a shit, right? This is a perfect example. This is me taking a swing, an hour-long swing, probably, hopefully, something like that. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But I'm also pretty sure that I'm going to have to take at least 52 swings of this before anybody is paying any attention to it, I think. So that's fine though. Again, it's a meditative process in business, and it's a way for me to get ideas from my mind out into the world. I will circle back around to growing the team, but there's when you have an idea and you think it's a cool idea, but you haven't thought through it that much. You're like, oh damn, that's sick. And then you're telling a friend about it. Here's an idea. And you start and you're like a quarter of the way through the story, and your confidence is just dying as you say it out loud. You're like, oh shit, this isn't a good idea. But you still kind of have to finish telling it. And then your friend's like, sure. Like, shit, that is a bad idea, right? This channel, there is some of that. For me to work through, is that a decent fucking idea? I need to be able to say them out loud to somebody. And my fiance, love her to death. I don't want to be boring her with these ideas all the time. I probably am, but that's just how my brain works. We're watching Top Chef, and she's and I'm like, oh, did I tell you about my idea? Whatever. So I said I'd get back to. Yeah, so we expanded, I expanded. I went from solo agent to solo agent with a small team in Minnesota. And I think there was only 2 agents at the time. And I thought, I'm going to add a 3rd agent, and then I'm going to step out of production so that I can do Denver. And so I did that, and it worked. And then because that worked, also, side note, because the first time I went out to Denver was when I met my fiance, but it was also a very, very boring trip. So that's a real factor, is I went out there and I felt like a goddamn assassin. I was just like, I flew in, picked up a car, drove to my hotel, maybe drove to like a Whole Foods or something, drove to my hotel, slept, woke up, shot content all day, probably about 1 video a day is all I could do alone. Shot a video, went back to the hotel, slept, woke up, shot a video, went back to the hotel, slept. Like, I didn't really know anybody there well enough to be like, hey, do you want to like go get dinner? I literally like, I knew some people in Denver, I think, but very, very loosely, and not really like in a way that I would have said, do you want to go out to dinner? So it's kind of crazy to think back on it. At some point, it's funny, I downloaded Hinge, which is where I met my fiance. I think Bumble. I downloaded Bumble, and that's where I met my fiance. But I did that because I was bored. I was bored out of my mind. And I had been single for like a year, I think, at that point, somewhere right around that. And so I got back and I was like, okay, the hardest part about those trips is that it cost me a good bit of money. Flights, hotel, rental car. And so if I was there for 7 days, I could shoot 7 videos, which would last, at the time, less than 2 months. because I was doing 1 video a week. Actually, at the start, I think I was even doing 2 videos a week to get the channel moving. So it would be like I'd have to go out there once a month at that rate for it to work. And at the time, flights were reasonably cheap. It was kind of still COVID-y times. I remember, I had to wear a mask for a while on the flights and stuff like that. But yeah, it's in being bored out of my mind. And thank God I had work to do. But oh my God. But in being bored out of my mind, obviously I met my fiance, awesome. And then when I came back, I started to think of like, how do I do this? I guess over some amount of time, I was doing it solo still, shooting B-roll and shooting the parts with me in it. And it occurred to me that if I had somebody just to shoot B-roll in everywhere that I was shooting videos, I would be able to basically double my production, right? Because a video takes a day, and that to do it right, to do it how I want to do it, and that's a half a day of B-roll, and the other half is me on camera, basically, or finding places to shoot and all that. I'm sure it sounds, if you haven't done it, it probably sounds like you put that much time into one video. It's like, yeah, I did. I still do. Now I have somebody shooting B-roll, and so I can do 2 videos in one day if I have full days available to me. And sure, could I technically do it faster? Yes, but it's really difficult to find like, where am I going to shoot? What exactly am I going to say? You have to like kind of get to a place, say, okay, is this an okay spot to shoot? And then say, okay, now exactly what am I going to say? Even though I have notes and things like that, I have notes ready to go for all these, but you still have to look through and go like, are these notes correct? Are they good? Am I going to get halfway through this like and be like out in the middle of this field or something like that and be like, shit, this isn't accurate, right? Or I need to fix this, or I wish I didn't say that because now I'm contradicting it and whatever. So it's important to have those notes dialed in. Anyway, it takes half a day. Long story short, it takes half a day to shoot just my parts on camera, and it takes another half a day for somebody, whether it's me or somebody else, to shoot B-roll. So I found somebody to shoot B-roll. My boy Paul, he works for me still. We are very tight. He rules, and he's been a huge contribution to my business, such that he is now a real estate agent. I'm trying to contribute to his lifestyle in a really big way too. So hired a B-roll guy, Paul, and then was going to try to find B-roll people in Denver and also one in like San Diego and Tennessee and whatever, all those places. But I ultimately realized like, well, I could just bring Paul along. The downside was that flights cost more, but the upside was that the Airbnb situation was fundamentally a fixed cost for one person, right? So I could go to Denver, spend $200 a night on an Airbnb, and very often there would be an extra bedroom that I just wasn't using. So you kind of realize like, all right, well, that's one of the biggest costs. Obviously flight is also, but yeah, we figured out a way where we could go out to these places for longer stints of time and really like get a lot more done. And we would have to fly less often, and we have to spend, ultimately, especially because I had somebody doing B-roll, we could fly out less often and be there for a little bit less time as well each time. So that's kind of how, I don't know how we did that, but ultimately, like in trying out those other markets, time has shown me that that there are 2 markets that outperform the others by a long shot. And it could be because I've been in them longer. It could be because I gave them more time and more dedication. It genuinely could be all those things. But the Twin Cities and Denver channels are the 2 best, right? And they perform the best. And so the other 3 currently are just kind of up in the air, right? They still exist, and they still occasionally bring in new clients and new interest, but mostly they just exist. I'm going to take a beverage break here real quick. Topo Chico's good, but I think it's not the right drink for a podcast where you're the only one talking. They're so bubbly. So I think ultimately the lesson that I learned from doing all of those channels was that there's kind of 2 parts. Managing people and managing those agents and getting them to buy into the system was difficult. And maybe there's some ego, or maybe it just was I didn't spend enough time and energy, or I didn't put the focus up front on, okay, you're going to get a client in from this channel, from this team. Here's exactly how you do it. And because mostly I found agents who had helped some clients. And so there was maybe some ego involved of like, no, I know how to take a client. It's like, yeah, but do you know how to take one of these clients? And I'm like, I've helped a lot of people in this process from these channels, and I figured out a really good way. And having that buy-in was really difficult, and holding them to the right standard was also very difficult. And so anyway, the other thing that I realized over time is that I could spend that same amount of energy on things, I think anyway, I could spend the same amount of energy on one channel or two channels. If I took all that extra energy I put into those other three channels, I think the two that are performing the most, that have the most momentum, could outperform the other three added up together. Well, and that was, to me, that was very, very obvious. But I thought, okay, it also spreads me less thin, and it takes it doesn't force me to take my eye off the ball in the two that work either, right? It allows me to like really pay attention to them. And yeah, and so that is the kind of thing that would be like those conversations, those thoughts, those thought processes are the kind of things that I would love to be able to see from somebody like Gary Vee or Alex Hormozi or whatever. I'd love to see why people scrap things and why people say no to things. I have a quote on my whiteboard that is, I think it's from Alex Hormozi. It says, focus is saying no, even to ideas you think are cool that would work. And to me, that's pretty compelling. Specifically the part that says, even to the ideas you think are cool that will work. Because it's like, well, I knew that I could make those other channels work. I'd proven the concept. I knew that it could work. But the focus is so important to the things that are working. And there's been so many times, just in real estate, just since I've done real estate, which is the last 5.5 years or so, where I look around and I go, what the fuck am I doing? You're like in the middle of this 6-month project and you go, what the hell am I doing? Why am I here? Like, why did I decide that this would be a good idea? And a lot of that is because if you look at like sort of the potential, the positive, the net side positive of just doing a real estate team, just doing this one team and putting a ton of energy into it, that upside is extremely good. And to think that I have like squeezed everything out of it is crazy. There's another thing that we have on our whiteboard. Again, these are the things that I need to be reminded of all the time. That's why they're on the whiteboard. It helps me to look at them and go, yeah, right. We have, there's just two different numbers basically on the whiteboard. One is 80K and one is 60K, or it's just, I think it's just a 60K to 80K. That's how many transactions occur in the Twin Cities metro every year. Real estate transactions, 60 to 80,000, which means real estate, it's sides, right? So you have the buy side and the sell side, which means that there's 120 to 160,000 sides every year. Every year. That's crazy. And the 60K, the reason why we even looked that up was because there were, I think in 2022 or 2023, you would hear about how volume of sales is down so dramatically in the metro, right? Or in the Twin Cities or in Minnesota or whatever, across the country because of interest rates, right? Rates went up, so volume of transactions went down. There were obviously people were skewing that information a lot. They'd say, oh, the market is down by 25%. The real estate market was not down by 25%. House prices were still like the same. They had held strong. The volume of sales were down by 25%. And so in my head, I was like, well, I mean, that is substantial, right? We were still doing better in that year than we had the previous because we were still pushing, right? We were still on the way up, and we still are on the way up. So even at 80 transactions last year, 40 million or something like that, we're still on the way up. And I'm doing everything in my power to continue to be on the way up indefinitely, right? And it occurred to me that 80 transactions is nothing compared to the total volume of transactions that exist. And so we looked into, okay, sales are down, volume of sales are down. How much are they down by? 25%. That's about 60,000 in the slow year, which then I was like, 60,000 transactions, which is 120,000 sides. And I was like, and people are complaining that there's not enough business. There's a ton of business. You just got to go get it. And then obviously 80,000, that's a high year, right? That's a busier year. So even in a slow year, there's 120,000 sides, which is crazy. And we did like, I want to say that year we did like 70 or something like that. And we did 70 out of 120,000. 120 transactions would be 0.1%, right? I'm doing that math right? 0.1%, a tenth of a percent. 1,200 transactions or sides would be 1% of all the sides that occur. And I was like, holy shit. There's so much more meat on the bones, right? There's so much more opportunity in just this one market that we already have a bunch of momentum in. And obviously, you can probably double those numbers considering that we have Denver. So trying to get my mind out of, for one, I'm always trying to ignore the noise of when people say the market is down, right? Or like, people would say like, oh, you got into real estate at a good time. It was such a crazy time. And I'm like, yeah, but it was nuts. And I was helping buyers, and I was a solo agent in 2020 and part of 2021. I was a solo agent, and I was showing buyers around all day, every day. So like this idea of like, oh, cool, yeah, convenient time. It's like, well, kind of. There was a lot of sales, but it was nuts. And it was so hard to get a house under contract. There's one weekend in particular that I remember writing 10 offers for 9 clients in a weekend, and one of them got accepted. And that's how that market felt. And I was helping a lot of first-time home buyers and people using down payment assistance and stuff like that. It was tricky. By the way, Oscar's behind me. He's being a very good boy. He's chilling. Yeah, I have a dog, Oscar, if you haven't seen that. So that's one of like those biggest lessons that I learned that I need to remember and I need to constantly remind myself of. Is to keep my eye on the ball, is to focus on growing the thing that has momentum, right? Take one thing that has momentum and squeeze more out of it, because there's way more to be squeezed out of it. And so that is something that I'm actively working on right now. And a lot of that is just growing the content side of To the Twin Cities. So I'm going to focus on that right now, on To the Twin Cities. The content side of To the Twin Cities is very much, it's sort of like on a maintenance mode, if you will, for that channel. It has been for a little while, where we're doing our best to put out content that we know to be helpful, that builds sort of the resource library of the channel without having to necessarily like reinvent the wheel. And I do want to, I'm working on figuring out, by way of finding talent, I'm working on how do I make, let's say the channel right now consists primarily of resources, right? Let's call it like middle of funnel or whatever, middle of spear or whatever, where once people have found it, and I also do think of all these videos as, so largely these videos, most of the videos on the channel are virtual tours of different neighborhoods or suburbs. And by virtual tour, I mean like genuine, true videos where they're sort of vlog style. I'm out there typically in it, talking about it, and we're like breaking down what it's like in a certain area. We're talking through some stats, but we're also showing what it's like to be there. And to me, that's like the special sauce. It's the secret recipe. That's the most valuable thing that we do, is that we have a lot of B-roll and we really do our best to show rather than just tell, which is, again, kind of partly what this style of video is for on the real estate agent side of things, is how do I show some of the process, right? So we have that channel, and by the way, let me back. This first episode of this, I feel like I have to like create like a ground, like a, what would you call it? Like a groundwork, a framework, a foundation for a real estate reference, like a foundation of this is where I'm coming from. Because I think if I just was talking about it, it's like I wouldn't have enough context in my own brain, even though I gotta assume that there are going to be people who only watch the 10th episode, right? Or only watch the 50th episode. And they're not going to have all this background, but they can go get it if they need it, right? And so that's what this is for. And so we make these resources that are virtual tour style videos, again, trying to be super helpful. That's even part of the branding, is we try to say like this channel aims to be the best resource, things like that. And I think it is. I think it is genuinely for people who can at least tolerate the style of video. I think it is actually the best style, or the best resource. And we go deeper in areas than anybody else does. And a lot of the other videos that I see, people are they're trying to make every video be what kind of the marketing term would be like the tip of the spear, right? Or top of the funnel, where it's a wider concept that is more, which we do have some of these videos, which would be like a pros and cons of living in the Twin Cities. So many people have made that video. And those videos do well. So even though 1 million people have made them, they still can do pretty well. We try to do ours better and different than everybody else, but yeah, still a bunch of people do them. So those though are more, that's like when somebody's just beginning to consider moving to a place. They might say like, should I move to, or pros and cons of, or cost of living in, right? These are like big picture questions where maybe they have a potential job opportunity, or maybe they're just moving somewhere because they just want to move. And so they're asking these big questions. And that's tip of spear, right? So that's like so in the way that it's tip of spear, what that really means is like that you're most likely to catch the most amount of eyeballs on that. So people are going to become aware of you, right, by the tip of the spear, or the very, very top of the funnel. Bottom of the funnel being like, this is a customer who is paid, right? Top of the funnel being like, this is somebody who now knows you exist. And those are very, very different things. And so I think some people are very stuck on making tip of the spear because they equate views with clients. True, you can't have clients from content without some views, but more views does not inherently mean more clients. And so we try to build trust by making like middle or bottom of the funnel type videos. But in order to get somebody to get into the middle of the funnel, you kind of need top of funnel, right? I'm going to try to stop using the spear and the funnel reference in the same conversation. And so, but one of the things that I think that we could do better is create more top of funnel and create higher quality top of funnel content that's really interesting and very, very compelling and undeniable. And so I'm working on trying to find some talent basically to help me with that in the way of like a photographer, in the way of a videographer. And somebody who like, I'm looking for somebody who's like a version of me who I can see myself in, who's like kind of a psycho and obsessed with things and really wants to grow their understanding of content and the likes of YouTube and stuff like that. So, and marketing in general. And I don't think they have to be, well actually I know they don't have to be like a marketing graduate or something like that. They just have to be obsessed, because you don't need to go to school to learn this stuff. You just need to be obsessed. So that's kind of one of the things that I'm working on, is how do I create more top of funnel content while middle or bottom of funnel content, which is mostly like those resources, those virtual tour type videos, while those still are on maintenance mode, right? Those are still getting cranked out and they're still there and being helpful, and maybe even trying to figure out a way for them to be more helpful. And one last thought on those virtual tours. They still are top of funnel. potentially. And we find that people still do find us that way. It just has fewer views, and I think there's a little bit, it's a more specific prompt that somebody's, more specific search that somebody's putting into Google or YouTube. So in Minnesota, for example, we have a virtual tour coming up of Golden Valley, Minnesota. That is a small area. And the amount of people who I think are typing in like Golden Valley, Minnesota, it's probably not that many people. But if they do, they'll find a sick resource on it that nobody else will provide them as good of a resource as us. And then they might go, oh, that was really good. What else do these people have, right? Or like, that was a very helpful resource. So there's that. And then there's the people who have found us through top of funnel videos or whatever, who subscribe and just, they go, I will watch their videos because maybe they're a year out or 2 years out from moving, but they want to help to make a short list of places that they think they're interested in, right? And that's genuinely the whole idea of that. So again, working on finding talent to help me with that top of funnel content. And that will also include social media stuff, because I think social media can work for bottom of funnel, right? It can convert somebody from being aware of you to actually choosing to work with you. But I think that the YouTube videos, specifically how we do them, I think they are a better top of funnel. Again, because it's an exceptional resource and we spend so much time doing that. So then this other thing, man, this is a long way around to this one thing, but I hope that the context of this is helpful. I think it is for me. Again, this helps me now get to the second episode, which will be a little bit more like, okay, I'm in it and this is what I'm doing. These are the things that I'm thinking about. And I don't need as much backstory. So I'm getting close to having to be done here too. The newest thing that I'm considering making is a YouTube channel or a video series on the main channel that are, this is one of those things. This is one of those things where it's like you're telling your friend and you're like, is this a bad idea? Is this a bad idea? I think it's a sick idea, but I'm not totally sure. I have to try it a little bit. But our motorcycle, almost like moto vlog style videos, and I think specifically through luxury areas of the Twin Cities. Can you see the confidence wavering on my face? I think the luxury thing makes sense, and some of that will be related to the branding and how it comes across. And I tend to think it needs to be a different channel, because I think if just all of a sudden people who are paying attention to the main channel saw moto vlog style, I think they'd be like, what the hell? What channel is this? Even though it scratches a similar itch to our virtual tours. And it will be a cousin to those virtual tours, but I think it will be a very interesting package to watch, to immerse yourself in an area. And again, I think there's some branding that goes along with it. I generally think like the branding of this team and like the motorcycle world, in the same way that like the music world and the arts world in general, there's a real overlap there. And I also just think it's the footage of a moto vlog, which, have I even explained? A moto vlog is like a POV. You're on a motorcycle, you have a camera here or here, and you're driving through somewhere, and you have a camera and often a microphone. So that there would be like a microphone. It would be sort of like a guided tour on a motorcycle, and I think it would be a vibe, right? Not to overuse the word vibe, but like, or not to use the kind of an overused word, but I think like by packaging it in like, here's a tour of a location. They're like beautiful areas. That's partly why I think the luxury thing makes the most sense, because it's kind of the most scenic. And I think there's a level of like relaxation that can exist in a moto vlog or a motorcycle vlog or whatever. There's kind of a chillness to that. And so by trying to be in a chiller area, and not just chiller, but trying to be in a scenic and beautiful area, I think would provide some value. And then obviously there's like I think if somebody rides motorcycles and is moving to the Twin Cities, there's fucking nobody else doing that. I mean, I Googled it. There's like one person who does moto vlogs, and they're just like a moto vlogger. And maybe even people who already live in the Twin Cities. Again, there's a weird like zen to it. I only know this because I've been watching them lately. Because I'm buying a motorcycle, or I bought a motorcycle. It's cool. It's a Royal Enfield Interceptor 650, or INT 650 in the States. It's cool. I'm excited to get it. I don't have it yet. I think I get it on Thursday. So for the next one of these, I will have it. And they're just cool bikes. They're very affordable, but they're very customizable. And while again, Royal Enfield is not inherently like a luxury bike or luxury adjacent, there's like this customizability of it. There's this aesthetic that works beautifully with kind of the overall brand of things. And I think that like, if you think of like all of like the elements in this room as like a character or a packaging, however you want to think of it, a packaging of a brand, right? If the product of real estate was, I don't know, what's a good example? What's something you unbox? I don't know. That's so funny that I can't think of this. A phone, right? A smartphone. If real estate, if there's a sort of an equivalent parallel where real estate is a phone, that doesn't make any sense. Yeah, then like the packaging of it is all of the marketing, is like everywhere that the marketing takes place. And for like, so for this video, this room that I'm in, this studio space, this is the packaging. I think there's also a little bit of like how I'm speaking is the packaging, and how I look is also a bit of packaging. But at the end of the day, the setting is the packaging. And I think there's a cool way to overlap the setting of being on this pretty, like, it's a modern classic bike, so it's a pretty timeless looking bike. It's not like a crotch rocket or anything like that, and it's not like an absolute hog either. To be on that, to be driving through areas, to be talking about it, I think there's a cool opportunity there to have completely unique packaging, and also it sounds fun because I like to ride a motorcycle, and I think that there's something there. By the time for this next video, I will have the motorcycle. I don't know that I will have shot a video quite yet because I get it on Thursday, and maybe I will. And so those are the things that I think next week I'll be thinking through quite a bit. Is what am I doing in that video, right? Like, how am I editing them? I think I'll have to edit them more than I'm editing this, for the record. But yeah, am I editing it? Obviously I have editors, so I think we'll do that to make it like a bit more dynamic. Am I doing any other footage? Is it only footage on the bike, or am I going to increase the challenge by like adding drone? And I don't know about that. Would it be really cool if like Paul and I both rode together? Could be sick. But parting thoughts, last thought. While Paul is awesome, and Paul is my absolute homie, he's got his own things he's doing now too in the real estate world, and there are goals that we have together for him. And that, I gotta say, it doesn't include him riding around on a motorcycle with me. Maybe eventually. But so, one of the biggest lessons I learned very early on in real estate, and it was like a lesson about life and about business and about pursuing difficult things, is if you have a personality like me, which is I will do everything it takes for me to be successful in this thing, and I will be a psycho and I will be obsessed, and I'm not afraid to be uniquely obsessed about something. If you have that personality, creating a format, building a world for content that requires another person is not a good idea. And that kind of comes from the music world. The main band that I was in, Alistair Hennessy, was a 6-piece band for most of it. 6 people is a lot of people to wrangle. It was very fun, and there was kind of a brotherhood and a fellowship that existed there that was very cool. But wrangling all those people is difficult. Getting everybody on the same page is even more difficult. And executing a vision is almost impossible with too many cooks in the kitchen. Executing a vision with a couple people is doable. Executing a vision with one person who's leading the show, who says, please do this, I think if that person is devoted enough and has the skills and is willing to acquire skills and also is willing to leverage. Now I'm kind of moving over to the real estate world. You have the skills and you're willing to leverage things out to people that do have the skills, but you are running the show and you're saying, please do this. If that is your personality, please take my advice. And again, this is me telling me about the motorcycle idea. Please take the advice, figure out a way to make this content interesting and compelling without needing another person to be involved. Because if you have the other person who needs to be involved, that's just one more reason for it not to get done. Okay, that's it. That's it for this episode. Thanks for watching. Bye.